In order for the crypto airliner to take flight, we need a couple of things. We need a fairly clear regulatory forecast. We don't need for the weather to be perfect. We just need to not fill the regulatory boot squarely on our necks. We need a little bit of wiggle room. The second thing we need is liquidity. One of those two things, I think we can say it's kind of in hand. Probably soon, very, very soon, we'll have one of those two things. The other thing, we're kind of in a holding pattern. Let's talk about Cardano and the waiting game. If the only waiting you're interested in is waiting for the delivery of your moon Lambo because your bags have pumped so hard, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Okay, thank you for joining, everyone. Let's see, who have we got in here? We've got Bam 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 Crypto. We've got Fly Over Me. We've got Pucky Hawk. Alberito couldn't make it, but dropped in the comments for a second. Appreciate that. Hilldog's here. Daniil's here. Neo Chad is here. Corny G is here. Jordan for America's here. Thank you. Thank you. At Rulo13 is here. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I appreciate it. So I think a lot of the crypto space looks a bit like this thumbnail right now. We're all sort of waiting. I think we kind of know, we kind of have an idea. I'll say we kind of have an idea of when the regulatory certainty, or at least some, some sufficient level of regulatory certainty might happen. Let's see. Jero Sika says, ciao from the sunniest pit in the Balkans. Ada gang decentralized everywhere. Thank you for joining from the Balkans. I appreciate that. So I think we kind of have a roadmap. We sort of know how this is going to go. Jay Marie is here. Thank you for joining. As always, let's go. I think we kind of know what's going to happen with the market structure bill. We know that everybody was in DC over the last, day or so. All of the big centralized exchanges, all the parties we talked about yesterday, and they're in there talking to the Democrats, and Lummis is talking to the Democrats, and Gillibrand is trying to rally her colleagues to come to some kind of a compromise on the market structure bill. We know the Clarity Act already passed the House, so now we just need to get things through the Senate. So we kind of know what's going to happen on the regulatory certainty side of this. And I think that's one component. If we had the anti-crypto armies boot right on our neck, like we did for a lot of the last 4 years, the last 4-year cycle, then things would be a lot less certain. But this time around, we have a much more, exponentially more friendly regulatory environment. The other piece for airliner crypto to take off is we need liquidity. If you've been around for a few cycles, you've already come to that sad realization I talked about a couple of nights ago. That realization that no matter how good your tech is, no matter how strong your community is, this whole liquidity cycle is the big thing with all speculative assets, including crypto. It's sad. It's a horrible realization to come to, but eventually in crypto, you admit it to yourself. After you watch it happen several times and you realize the liquidity cycle is calling the shots. It doesn't matter who's building what technology. It doesn't matter what awesome thing is happening in crypto. It doesn't even matter what laws are in place if the liquidity cycle doesn't say it's time to take off. So we're going to talk about that for a second. B117 I8Z says Charles took Elizabeth Warren on a date. That is some horrifying imagery. That is horrifying. On the Charles front, though, I will say, I've been thinking lately, since we know that a lot of crypto is kind of looking like this thumbnail right now, I think the timing of midnight, ever since we found out that midnight was going to happen in 2025, I've sort of felt like Charles is always very careful with timing. And I felt like the timing of midnight, the actual launch of the mainnet, was going to be very carefully timed by Charles to happen at just the right time, given, you know, optimal prices, optimal pricing in the crypto ecosystem. So it's not really a surprise to me that the scavenger mine wasn't rushed directly after the conclusion of the claim period, right? It wasn't really a big surprise, because if I was Char or Chaz or Ginger Snap, either one of them, I I would be waiting as long as possible. Even if there was no reason to wait right now, I would be waiting before launching that scavenger mine, because right now you probably want to stretch things out. You probably don't want the midnight mainnet launch to happen too early, right? We got to get all the way through the scavenger mine before that happens. So I think things like timing are never lost on on IOG. So I think that may be what's going on here. But let's talk about this liquidity thing. So what have we got going on right now? Well, I think there's something that's might be a little misleading. I think a lot of people, they hear liquidity, and you often hear things like, it doesn't matter how you measure liquidity, whether it's US M2, global M2, Fed balance sheet, it doesn't really matter. So they do the logical thing. They pull up, M2 Fred, because they know they're going to get the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis's numbers, which, are widely relied upon. And they look at it and they say, wait a second, you guys are all saying we need more liquidity, but when I look at this M2 chart, it looks to me like we've had expanding liquidity for a long time here, since the bottom cleared on here in 2023. It looks to me like liquidity has been going up. So what are all these complaints about liquidity? And of course, if you've been around the block a few times, you know what the problem with this is. This is absolute M2. It is not real M2. It's not adjusted for things like inflation. When we adjust for inflation, see, the y-axis of this chart is measured in billions of 1982 to 1984 dollars. So they're keeping the value of the dollar, the unit on the y-axis, are keeping it constant across the x-axis here, which is time. So when we look at it like this, you see, what we had was this giant vertical wall during COVID. During COVID, we decided to shut the whole world down, and we compensated for that by this gigantic vertical wall of liquidity. It was like this gigantic vertical wall, and then they chilled a tiny bit, but it still went, on a 45-degree angle till it got clear up here, in like late 2021. After that, it went on a matching 45-degree angle, clear down here till, mid 2024. And it's just been kind of languishing. Sure, there's a little uphill, there's a little improvement here, but not much. Nothing like this. Not a big bump. Not like this. Not like this thing. This is just this very slight increase. And when we look at the Fed balance sheet, we see something very similar, even worse. Look at the Fed balance sheet, and what do we have? Nothing but down. As we know, it's been quantitative tightening all the way down. Turtles all the way down, guys. Owl tightening all the way down. The owl has been tightening the talons all the way down. He did announce, as we talked about the other day, that in the next couple months, there was some probability that they would cease the quantitative tightening. And we know what happens after the quantitative tightening ends. Good things. So this is what we're all sort of waiting on right now. It's like we've had tightening Fed balance sheet, we had quantitative tightening, QT. Now we want QE. We need that liquidity. This is the real problem. So, and people have, here's a good comment. Okay, here's a good comment in this. The issue is not liquefy. We need good products, apps, games to cause network effect. People don't understand crypto. Remember, ADA got to 100 billion market cap without smart contracts. Yeah, no, I agree. I think you made the point, though. I think your third sentence made the point that I would make about the first sentence. So we do need good products, apps, games. We do need network effect. But I knew you meant liquidity. I saw your comment here, liquidity. We do need those things for sure, but we're not going to build those things this cycle, right? We're not going to build those things in the next couple months. These are things that are going to matter in 2029. Like whatever network effect we have, it's pretty much here. Sure, retail could rush in and you could say that's, that's network effect in action, something like that. But we're not going to build out, 150 new apps in the next, 6 weeks. What's going to matter in this cycle is already built out. All those things are going to be built out later. What's going to matter this cycle is already built. It's already here. Now the thing that matters is the liquidity thing. It's the macro environment. It's this it's the macro trends are what are holding us down right now. And we know that because it's not just Cardano. If the reason why Cardano's price was where it is was only because of the need for more apps, more games, more network effect, then it would just be Cardano that was doing so horribly right now. But if you look at CMC, it's the entire crypto space. It's the macro stuff. And really, it's just the liquidity thing. It's 2021 was a totally different environment because we had that vertical wall. You can see right here. You can see the Fed balance sheet expanding right here and creating this vertical wall that you only see right here in 2008. That's the only other place you see that on this chart, right? Massive liquidity because they were afraid the entire economy was going to blow up. And again here, massive liquidity. This is just not the same as this. In this environment, speculative assets like crypto go crazy. But I think your point is not lost. In the long run, we need the things you talked about in your first sentence. But your third sentence made the point. Remember, ADA got to 100 billion market cap without smart contracts, and that was because of the massive liquidity. Cardano's technical promise, yes, that was also necessary, but the massive liquidity is what caused that. So, Family G7 says, yeah, I feel the same. Okay. This is a pretty funny comment. We'll actually talk about this a little bit later on. Somebody asked me to address the Cardano issue. This is a pretty funny, non-serious question. Is the 40x Cardano bull pump still on? I think we all know the answer to that if you're paying attention to the news today, but we'll get to that. So why do we know there is going to be a period of greater liquidity for crypto in macro generally? Why is there going to be more liquidity? It's because of this post. This was a post just today. US national debt reaches new all-time high of 38 trillion. So this is something everybody in crypto talks about all the time. I talk about it all the time on this channel, but the debt is unmanageable. The only way to manage this debt is to debase the currency. This is a story as old as governments. Governments who have the ability to print their own currency are going to run at a deficit. They're going to run up uncontrollable debts, and they're going to debase the currency to control those debts. We're now reaching, some would argue the end stage of that, but they've been pretty good at stretching this thing out. So we don't know when it's going to end, but this is how we know there's going to be more liquidity. It's the only way. It's the only way to mitigate the negative effects of this level of crushing debt. Family G7, I sure hope you're right. The combination of Midnight, Laos, Hydra is going to kill the rest of the other blockchains. I hope you're right. I hope you're right. The owl is going to turn the faucet on soon. I mean, nobody really knows what he's going to do, what the Fed's going to do. Nobody can say with certainty. But he did say in that Philadelphia speech that I covered on this channel, he did say he did express a viewpoint that it was very possible they would see the conditions that are sufficient to end quantitative tightening in the next couple of months. When I heard that, my perception was we're talking about an end of tightening maybe in December. He said the next couple months, something like that. I'm paraphrasing. You can go back and listen to his exact words. So I'm going to misremember and paraphrasing correctly all those things. So listen for yourself. But that's what I took away from that. Mission Zambia, thank you. Thank you for joining. Tomorrow is Zambia's Independence Day. Happy Independence Day to Zambia. I think independence is a wonderful thing for all human beings. So whenever I hear about a country celebrating their Independence Day, it makes me a little happy on the inside because I think independence and freedom are literally the most important remedies to the human condition. Can we talk about Cardano and freedom tomorrow? I like to think we talk about Cardano and freedom every single day on this channel. I think that's what I'm thinking about. Maybe I don't do a good job of conveying that, but what I'm really thinking about every single day is Cardano and freedom. I think that's why we're all really here. Oh, I think we've got an item in here about this. Since we are looking for usage, what exactly are people doing on the other chains? Solana I hear is Solana I hear is like 95% BS transactions, but NFTs really? Yeah, I think I've got an item in here. I definitely meant to include an item on this very topic, and yep, I can see it. I can see it on one of the tabs. We're going to talk about that. Okay. I can't even. Hey, OS, let's be honest. Cardano is the best crypto tech that will never be, meets all the things, but the current crypto citizenship critics? Are you saying meets all the things, but the current crypto, are you saying citizenship or critics? I think you're saying critics, maybe. This is a good point as well. We'll get to this topic, but Family G7 says if you ask ChatGPT about Solana, it will say that if they continue with their current hardware upgrade model, it will not be sustainable over the next 5 years. Yeah, there have actually been some good posts about that by people who are sort of in the Cardano ecosystem. I'll just say these people are in the Cardano ecosystem, but the size of the ledger, we've known this from the start about Solana. The size of the ledger is not manageable. It's not manageable. And when your ledger is that gigantic, you've got to be constantly upgrading your hardware to deal with it. And there are probably other reasons why they have to upgrade their hardware so often in Solana to do what Solana does. But yeah, serious sustainability questions there from my perspective. If somebody can explain to me how it's sustainable, please do so. I'm open-minded to hear those arguments, but I have not heard them yet. So speaking of comparing us to other chains, yeah, this is my suspicion too, actually. Family G7, it will get centralized. Yeah. When sort of in my opinion, the central premise of your blockchain ecosystem is that you're going to sacrifice decentralization for scaling, you're also happy to do that again and again until you're basically an Excel spreadsheet, until you're totally centralized. Marco, thank you for joining. Happy to watch it live for once. Hello, AOS from French, Quebec City, Canada. You're my DRep, my stake pool, and I'm learning my English with you. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the delegation to both. And thank you for learning your English here. I appreciate that. Thank you. Happy to have you. So very much appreciate that. Let's look now at something interesting, something we talked about last night. So last night I said, hey, somebody should run the numbers, because this is something we do periodically, but someone should run the numbers. Where does Cardano fall in the total value locked rankings if you count Cardano staking as TVL? And here Tap Tools has done the legwork for us. They said if staked ADA were counted as TVL, Cardano would rank number 2 in the world. That's higher than Solana, Tron, BSC, and every other chain. Only Ethereum sits above. And part of the reason Ethereum sits above is because DeFi Llama does let them count their staked Ether as part of their TVL. Because if you go on DeFi Llama and you highlight their TVL metric, it gives you an explanation of how the metric works, and it specifically mentions it has to be locked in a smart contract. So that's part of the verbiage that makes up their definition of TVL. So that's kind of how they get away with it. Sub-Zero V67 says, what's up, AOS? Thanks for making a video. What do you think will be needed for the scavenger mine? How difficult will it be? So I think the deal with the scavenger mine is that it's very much aimed at retail. It's aimed at us, regular people, not professional miners. So my opinion, and what I've also been told by someone, is that that's going to mean CPU. The computation that's going to be necessary during the scavenger mine will be CPU based. But my response to that was based on what I saw back in the old days. So if you weren't around back in the early days of crypto, what happened was You had CPU mining. Everybody you could just mine with your regular computer. And then all of a sudden people were like, oh, wait, I can use GPUs and mine much faster than these guys using their CPUs. And so GPU mining took over. And then application specific integrated circuits, ASICs, took over. These are like, these little brick things, with special circuitry designed just for whatever algorithm, you're mining on. And ASICs, soon took over the entire crypto, Bitcoin mining space. And so people started coming out with these like ASIC resistant protocols. They labeled them. And even sometimes you would hear about GPU resistant protocol, something like that. People are claiming like, oh, this one's going to be different. This protocol is going to be different. People with CPUs will be able to mine on this one again. And it seemed to me like the impression I got back in those days was that immediately somebody would figure out they'd figure out some kind of workaround. And then all of a sudden the GPUs would dominate again. So I don't know. This is a much shorter period. The scavenger mine is 30 days. So this isn't like a thing that's going to go on for years and people are going to figure out a way to figure out some workaround that makes it impossible for us regular people to participate. I hope that's not what happens. And this is a much shorter period of time. So hopefully this is a thing that we can all do just with our regular computers and it doesn't get crazy and dominated by guys with GPU rigs they've built in laundry baskets, which was the case back in the day. I actually knew people who had like laundry baskets they were using as frames for GPU rigs, and they had extension cords running all over their living rooms. This was not me, but people I knew were doing this back in the day. So I don't think that'll happen here. Hope it doesn't. It's meant for all of us normal people to participate in. Okay. So the take-home message when it comes to crypto, all the glitters is not gold. They're playing games to make numbers go up, but once playing those games, take their greed, share, buy chain. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Okay, so we can actually check these numbers, though. I think it's important that people understand how true this really is. Like, we really are the second biggest chain in terms of DeFi. It's just that the arbitrary verbiage everybody's chosen to include in this definition of TVL doesn't include the huge thing that we all do for DeFi in Cardano. Cardano is actually a super DeFi heavy chain. It's just that we have this awesome native self-custodied staking that has a good enough yield that people choose to do that instead of the regular DeFi stuff because we don't have to lock our assets. I talked about this a lot last night, but it's important you understand we're actually the second biggest. Look at this. So if we go here are the DeFi Llama numbers by chain. We have Ethereum at 82, DeFi TVL. We're not going to talk about bridged assets and those numbers, a little bit different metric. Solana at 10.741 billion. So between first place and second place, you've got 82 billion and 10.741 billion. So all we have to ask ourselves is how much Cardano is staked right now. If we come here to cexplorer.io, look at their little dashboard, 21.82 billion staked. 21.82 billion staked. You can figure out the dollar value of that based at, at any one time, based on the price of ADA. But that puts us very solidly right in here, guys. Right in here. We're in spot number 2. It's just this definition. Let's see. I don't know if you guys, you guys can see it on the screen. Sum of value of all coins held in smart contracts of all the protocols on the chain. Your main metric for DeFi should just be sum of value of all coins participating in DeFi on the chain. If that was the verbiage, we would be in spot number 2. I'm going to go ahead and offer we're the second biggest DeFi chain in all of crypto. We're just getting cheated out of that honor via verbiage. So, accept that if you like, don't accept it if you don't. Okay. I can't even says, it doesn't matter if we meet all the things unless it's acceptable and used by the majority. Cardano is by far better than all the other cryptos, but hated because of Charles, not his fault. But then, we talk about it all the time in Cardano. I talk about it all the time on this channel. Charles is a passionate guy. That's who he is. Would they still hate us? I would offer yes. They would still hate us. Why? because Cardano as an ecosystem has made a big bet on UTXO, which is very different than the EVM bet or the Solana virtual machine bet. The account balance world is a very different bet than UTXO. So they have to hate Cardano because if EUTXO turns out to be the right bet, then that means they were all wrong. So it's very easy for them to unify against Cardano, with or without Charles. Charles, passionate guy, easy for them to hate him as the figurehead of Cardano, but they would hate us anyways. Because if the EUTXO bet turns out to be right, that means they're all wrong. So they have to hate us. They have to strongly desire for us to lose. Same here. That whiteboard video, that's a lot of us. That whiteboard video Charles did brought a lot of us in. Lovey2588. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much. Okay. Midnight Sandbox to generate ZK proofs and gives metrics for CPU and memory usage. Someone needs to build a voting tool. Okay, yeah. I definitely agree with that last part. It's a large number. It's kind of hard to keep track. They come out every single day. If you watch the Cardano X Sphere every day, you're going to see them every single day. Every single day, some other large financial player you've heard of has come out with some kind of an exchange traded product for Cardano. It's like every day. Yeah, I actually showed that chart on the last night. Is it happening again tonight? It doesn't surprise me. If the rotation theory that some amount of speculative investment is going to rotate out of gold and into crypto is true, and I'm not saying it is, but if it is, then you feel bad for the old gold bugs who had their day in the sun for a second there, but it's not exactly terrible for us if that rotation theory is right. So yeah, so yeah, this was the chart. You can see we're in second place. Okay, on to something else. This is sort of the same topic a little bit here. So this is a really good post. I tend to enjoy Daniel Friedman's posts quite a bit. I think he and I are on the same page on a lot of things. And I've said that before on this channel, and I think it's certainly true of this post. His commentary on our Cardano ecosystem, I think, is some of the more insightful, and it's not lost on me that he's been here since the very beginning. So it kind of makes sense that he would have a little bit more insight in the ecosystem than maybe some other people. But here's what he wrote. There's been a lot of talk about Cardano's low DeFi volume, lack of liquidity, and USDC. Here are a few thoughts. Let's start with stablecoins. I keep seeing a lot of, if only Cardano had USDC, everything would change. Some think that it would bring more institutions, more DeFi, more volume, but that's not how it works. And he gives a great counterexample. Look at Algorand. They already have USDC, yet their DeFi volume is lower than Cardano's. That alone should tell us something. Bringing a mainstream stablecoin on-chain doesn't magically create activity. This is what I've been saying. It is not a cure-all. It usually amplifies what's already there. But if there's not much to amplify, it falls with a thud. Algorand's struggle isn't the absence of a stablecoin. It's the lack of unique, exciting incentives, a clumsy UX, poor wallet experience, and limited bridges. And honestly, a lot of that applies to us too. A lot of our user experience is still rough. And we don't have enough truly unique incentive-driven systems that make people want to stay active and pick Cardano over others. Without that, USDC would just sit there with no real return on investment for the ecosystem. Now, if you look at Solana, sure, the numbers look high, but let's be real. Most of that comes from the low cap coin casino speculation, the rise of crime-fi. I like this, the rise of crime-fi. I would argue that is certainly true. The sandwich attacks and the MEV, this to me is just all just crime. This is just like fraud and crime to me. The rise of crime-fi, rinse and repeat gambling and behavior far removed from first principles blockchain adoption. It's white noise traffic, not sustainability. I think that's very well put. These things don't have to do with the first principles of crypto, and certainly not with the first principles of crypto as applied to blockchain adoption. It is just white noise. Sure, it's working right now, just like just like gambling websites work for the internet, but it's not the beauty of the internet. Okay, if you're a gambling addict, it probably is the beauty of the internet. But for most people, gambling websites and certain other types of websites are not the true beauty of the internet. It's other things, the other things you do. So no, USDC alone won't fix liquidity or DeFi volume. What will are systems that people want to use because they're smooth, intuitive, and rewarding. Every wave of technology from the web to mobile rewards simplicity. The smoother the experience, the faster the growth. Blockchain is no different. And you know what? I think this applies to exactly the conversation we just had. I think the beauty of native staking on Cardano is that it's very smooth and easy. You go into your wallet, you click a few buttons, and pretty soon you're staked to a stake pool. You get to keep self-custody of your assets, and you get a certain yield. It's very smooth. The incentive is very obvious. And a lot of people do it. A huge proportion of our community does stake their ADA because of exactly what Dan wrote here. And that's that the incentive is, exciting. The yield you get while still having to keep custody of your coins is exciting. You don't have to lobster trap yourself. You can keep your ADA in your own wallet. You get to keep your private keys. It's exciting to do that. So we've got this very, very exciting thing going on in our ecosystem. The tune of, what did we figure it was right now? Like 21 billion ADA. Got this super exciting thing. And that level of adoption of the native staking reflects how good the experience, the balance of user experience, versus incentive is there. We just don't have that with the rest of DeFi in Cardano, right? Like, if the user experience was good enough and the incentives to do it were good enough, more people would be doing it. The demand would be higher, but that's just not the case right now. And I think much like Algorand, even the inclusion of USDC or any other tier one stablecoin like Tether, whatever, the inclusion of any tier one stable would not be the cure-all as some people hope it would be. So I think that was a very insightful post Daniel Friedman wrote there. Okay. Imagine a game play to govern MMO with a DAO where token holders vote on updates, fund developers, and shape the game. Sounds intriguing. Sounds intriguing. There was one guy or gal, but someone who was the last person to buy gold before it tanked. I know, that's the saddest thing. You know that, I mean, there's there's like a counterparty for all those trades. So while we all fantasize about selling at the top, there's a counterparty for all those trades. Like, somebody's buying when you're selling, and that is kind of a sad thing to think about. Sol and ETH investors are afraid of ADA. Charles knows it. He's a brilliant mind. I agree with all that. Yeah, I mean, they should be afraid, because if Cardano is right, that means that account balance is wrong. If UTXO is right, account balance is wrong. And that should be scary. Like, I don't think they really care. Like, I don't think people in the EVM world care if another EVM, protocol does fabulously. If another EVM based ecosystem does fabulously, they don't care, because it's just sort of, to them, it's an extension of their own sort of ecosystem. But if something wildly different does well, that means they could get left behind, and that's scary. And as we all know, fear begets hatred. They definitely hate us. Pucky Hawk says, my portfolio does not discriminate if there is money involved. Fair enough. I'm with you on that. Peter Schiff stunned. I was hoping to see a bunch of Peter Schiff like GIFs or memes. I haven't seen them yet. They're probably around already, but I haven't seen them. I would imagine there are probably a lot already. Okay, I think it's all going to work itself out. The big institutions are most likely having fun before regulations and just blowing with the market for grins. Yeah, I think it's nice to think of, this like evil cabal behind all this stuff, but I think it's more organic than that. I think it's like, it's sure, a lot of big institutions, and they're out, for their own benefit, and a million small retail people who are out for their own benefit, with varying levels of ability to execute on that. And it results in this organic, unpredictable beast that does weird stuff sometimes. This is a great way to talk about, great way to describe Cardano staking. It's Christmas every 5 days. It sure is. It sure is. Ooh, Decentra Studios. I like that little emoji, and we're gonna do some of that. Not tonight, but sometime. Phil, controversial opinion. Bitcoin is also proof of stake. They just have extra steps to put their stake into the system by using their BTC to buy hardware and electricity. Yeah, I mean that's I think that's a really good opinion. That's a really good point. So you can have, people have tried to point out that proof of stake, proof of work, any kind of proof of blank is not really the important part, because that just chooses who's going to validate that particular block or slot or however we're divvying up the blockchain. The important thing is the actual protocol you're using to reach consensus, right? Are you using Nakamoto protocol or something else? What are you doing to reach that consensus? Like, who validates the block is, you have to figure that out, but it's not the important part. So I think you make a very good point here. It's that's not the important part. The important part is how you actually reach consensus. Like, just electing the slot leader or electing the validator for that block is kind of just like this little routine bureaucratic part of the whole process. What's the point of having the best tech? Meets all the right things, but the current environment encourages the force bandits. Long time Adam Holder, FYI. So yeah, I, I think you're right. I think you're right. Like the the um the robbery forest is a huge problem. It's a huge problem for the EVM world. And I don't know the law. They have a way around it. I mean, they can't. There's too much institutional momentum for them to re-engineer everything, to re-architect everything to solve the robbery forest problem. So I mean, we'll see what happens. It's gonna be entertaining as that problem gets worse and worse and worse, and they realize they need to do something about it. It's gonna get entertaining, but whether or not they can ever fix it, I don't know. Okay. I bought my wife Cardano and XRP for our 31st wedding anniversary. She told me my romance skills verge on legendary. That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. Everybody should tell their significant other that and see how they react. We'll see how that goes for everybody. Asia had lines of people waiting to sell their gold objects 24 to 48 hours before crash. Yeah, in parts of Asia, gold is very serious business. That is there is a level of attention paid to gold that is very different than parts of the West. That is for sure. Okay. Stuart Level says only dummies sold their gold. Central banks load up. Dumb retail sell. Same old story. Yeah, I'll let the gold people worry about the gold price. That'll be I will let them worry about it. But I'm very happy for the gold people who finally had their day in the sun. I'm actually very happy for the gold people that got to have this little rally. So I'm happy for them. Okay. Next up. So like I said, a bunch of the centralized exchanges and a bunch of other actors, VCs, big institutions, were in DC trying to fix this problem in the Senate. The market structure bill, the Democrats were not wanting to play ball, not like they did with the Clarity bill in the House. So Cynthia Lummis, probably one of our biggest allies in the Senate. When I say our biggest ally, I mean crypto's biggest ally. She responded like, big day in Washington for digital asset market structure. And I didn't see anything contrary to this. I didn't see anybody saying they were super disappointed with the way things went. Everything was kind of like this. Like there was actually some good progress being made. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come. Hopefully they actually pushed some Democrats kind of over the line and we'll get some kind of a compromise and the regulatory clarity we've needed so badly for so many years. Brian Armstrong posted, Base is building private transactions. Somebody posted, who is making stablecoins private? Brian Armstrong says, we acquired the Ironfish team back in March of 2025 to start working on this. More to share soon. So, I mean, obviously, if you're Coinbase, you've got a huge incentive to jump in on whatever emerging trend there is. I mean, they were very successful in building Base. They built Base. They realized that they could build basically L2s, centralized L2s that would do the same things everybody wants to do on every chain, and they could just super centralize it and achieve scaling that others could not. They did that very, very successfully. So of course, given that success, I think they're going to jump in on every single trend. I think they're a little too late. I think midnight is so far ahead of you, Brian, but you have got instant adoption. If you build anything, you can instantly put that in the wallets of such a huge number of people. So when you're sort of the default fiat on-ramp, you have such access to users. It's like you can have that instant adoption just like they did with Base. So we'll see what happens with Coinbase and privacy. Okay. 2 nights ago, before the gold crash, someone I work with said to me, I've been thinking about buying some gold. That always happens. That happens, Giga Moon Boy. You've probably seen this before in crypto, but this happens to me every time we have some kind of parabolic high in crypto. Like, somebody who has never mentioned crypto to me before will suddenly ask me about crypto, even if they previously knew I was in crypto, and they may have never ever wanted to talk to me about it. And whenever we're right at the top, right when they absolutely should not buy, that is when they ask me if they should buy crypto. And I think you're also right about this. Right now, nobody is talking about crypto. Pucky Hawk, there are definitely lots of videos out there about staking. If I believe you said you have ADA, you should definitely self-custody it and stake it. I always advise people to get a hardware wallet. If you've got any amount of crypto you care about, get a hardware wallet, watch lots of videos about how to use hardware wallets. Don't lose your private key. Don't share your private key. Keep your crypto on your hardware wallet, and you can stake right from your hardware wallet. Don't give it to anybody. Don't let anybody have your crypto. Don't agree to any transactions on your hardware wallet unless you know exactly what's happening in that transaction. So lots of things to look out for, but watch all those videos. Watch a whole bunch of videos about staking and Cardano and about how to use hardware wallets, and you'll pick up the information you need in most cases. Okay, here's a good update. Ouroboros Phalanx came out yesterday, 20 to 30% faster settlement time, same risk, stronger randomness for slot leader. $56 for cheap guesses and 3.1 billion for deep dive guessing. We keep getting better. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things about Cardano. The constant improvement is some kind of, it's a marvel to watch the constant improvement in Cardano. But I think that's what happens when you get a bunch of smart people all in one community, all working toward the same goal. You get improvement like that, just constant incremental improvement. I'm with you on this, Pucky Hawk. You say you want to spread the word about crypto, but at the same time, you don't want anyone to know you have crypto. Tell no one. I 100% support that. Tell no one about your crypto. Do not tell anyone. Don't tell your friends. Don't tell your family, maybe your significant other, but tell no one else. Strongly support that. Okay. Udis Freetoff. Sup? How's it going? Thank you for joining. Always feel free to join. I'll take people late, early, anytime. Feel free to join anytime. Thank you for being here. Banker wife already is convinced I'm nuts, I believe. Yeah, I think banker wife says it all. I think any banker wife at this point would be convinced any Cardano person is crazy. Okay. Yeah, this doesn't surprise. I mean, this is the problem with centralized solutions. The problem with centralized solutions is exactly stuff like this. This is why I would never be an enthusiast of a centralized ecosystem. Here's a question to the group from Mr. LWeb CODMS. Question to the group: what wallet are you guys using? Assume most of you are not on centralized exchanges and using a hardware wallet, but which wallet software? So he's saying he assumes that everybody's not on centralized exchanges and that they're probably using hardware wallets, but what actual software interface are you using? Even if you're using a Ledger or a Trezor or whatever, like what actual wallet software interface are you using? So like what front end are you using? Okay, let's move on to something else. This is a little bit of a different topic, but this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. So this is Joseph.eth. He has pretty funny commentary on the crypto space in general. He was previously the CTO of SushiSwap and an Ethereum core dev. He was at Consensus. He's got some kind of a new company, but he points out something that I think is my main problem with a lot of credit card products in crypto. He says, use this credit card and have a taxable event every time you buy hot Cheetos. This is the problem with retail cards in crypto. So they usually there's a couple different types of retail cards that are offered in crypto. So you've got sort of credit cards that have rewards paid in crypto. That's one thing. But what a lot of people are really interested in are sort of debit cards where you've got an account with your crypto in it, and then you can like go to a regular Visa or MasterCard or Amex terminal and uh, swipe your card or tap your card and sort of seamlessly spend your crypto and have it converted into whatever your local currency is without you having to think about it. And there's some pitfalls there. You got to look out like what's the exchange rate? Are they taking, how many points are they taking off the actual spot price? You can get cheated that way by a card. But one of the bigger administrative problems is this. Right now in the US, these aren't wildly popular in the US. And this is the biggest reason why. Because right now we don't have this de minimis exception that actually Senator Lummis, who just appeared in this video, Senator Lummis is pushing for, because there is no de minimis exception for crypto. If you go and buy hot Cheetos at 7-Eleven with a crypto card, technically you are going to have to account to the IRS whether or not your crypto appreciated in between your acquisition of it and that disposition of your crypto in exchange for the hot Cheetos. No one wants to do that. No one wants to have a line item on their taxes that the IRS is going to peruse just because you bought some hot Cheetos. People are just not going to use crypto to buy hot Cheetos or coffee or anything like that, any de minimis purchase. That's why we need the de minimis exception. This is a really good point. It's something massively holding back a lot of people, even people who would otherwise be tempted to just spend directly out of their crypto accounts. They're not going to do it if you don't have a de minimis exception for exactly this reason. I think this is obviously funny, but it's a huge problem. So here's something that was foreshadowed a little bit earlier. Before we get into it, let's hit a few comments here. Cardano is like EBM. Ethereum is like Microsoft. Solana is like Apple. Cardano is better, but I think it will never realize that. One, because of Charles, and two, because it's built well. I don't know what the right analogs are there, but definitely I think Cardano, Ethereum, and Solana are as different from each other as IBM, Microsoft, and Apple. Maybe I would not say we're the IBM. I don't want us to be the super old school, super old school one. I guess you could say IBM is doing interesting things now, but I would hate to characterize us that way. Okay. Tangem card. Yep, we've had the Tangem card. The Tangem card has been something on Cardano's radar for a long time. Okay, so a bunch of people are answering that that wallet question that was posed to the group. This is also true. So if you don't know, Daedalus is our full node wallet. It was the wallet that Cardano launched with. It was an IOG product. I don't know if they actually built it or if they paid somebody to build it, but it was kind of pushed out along with the launch of Cardano, before we even had staking. But it's a full node wallet, right? And for purposes of decentralization, especially back in those days, it was important to have a full node wallet. But the problem with the full node wallet is you have to download the ledger, which wasn't a problem on the first day of Cardano, but now is a giant problem. So if you've never used Daedalus and you wanted to use it, probably you would use it one time, and waiting for it to download the ledger and do all that work to get synced, you would be pretty sad. Now we've got some better technology. We've got some technology that's supposed to make those kinds of things easier. I've talked about it before on this channel. So I don't know what it's like these days to try to sync Daedalus, but I can definitely say back in the day, it was not fun. So, okay, this is a really interesting point, Cardano universe. So this is true. People have talked about this over the years with relation to Coinbase. I've talked about on this channel how I was a victim. I'll call myself a victim of the Bitfinex hack back in the day. I had, some amount of Bitcoin on the Bitfinex exchange. It got hacked. And my understanding, I think everybody's understanding after it happened, was that only certain accounts got hacked. But to mitigate the damage, Bitfinex socialized the losses across all of our accounts so that it wasn't like the people who got hacked lost everything and everybody else was fine. Everybody took a haircut. And then there was this whole thing where they launched a coin that was kind of like an IOU, like, hey, here's this coin, and we're going to pay you back the amount you lost. And eventually they paid us back the amount we lost. But by then, Bitcoin had appreciated in value. So we got paid back the amount, on the date that it was hacked, or that the losses were socialized to you, as opposed to the amount that it would have been worth on the day they paid it back to you. It was a huge mess. Coinbase, on the other hand, I agree. People talk all the time about how it hasn't happened on Coinbase. Here's the question. Here's the darker, more interesting question. Has it not happened on Coinbase, or was Coinbase just able to cover the losses, right? And I don't mean Coinbase in particular. I mean any centralized exchange that's never reported a hack. So the question that people always asked is, they're not really saying that a hack has never happened. What they're saying is that their users have never suffered loss because of a hack. So the question is, have hacks happened that they were just able to cover? I mean, because if you're Coinbase and you could cover the losses of a hack, you might not tell anybody. Now it's different because they're a public company. They're a public company now. They have certain reporting obligations, so there's a lot more transparency. But with any, and I'm not picking on Coinbase here, just any centralized exchange that's never reported a hack, it could be they were never hacked, or it could be that they were just able to cover the losses and they then didn't have an incentive to report that the hack had occurred. Okay. So here's the post I referenced earlier. So this came up in a comment a little bit earlier in relation to everybody's favorite blockchain ecosystem, everybody's pick for the most honest blockchain system in all of crypto. That's right. This post says, so the original post down here, we'll kind of go in order here. The original post down here was everything about Solana is fake. The TPS, the users, the volume. This is somebody, and DB Crypto is an account, 15.7 thousand followers. But he's expressing an opinion. Looks like that everything about Solana is fake. The TPS, the users, volume. This is something you hear a lot in crypto. Then he quotes this post. The head of developer relations at the Solana Foundation spammed the Electric Capital repo with a PR to add 7,916 repos to the Sol devs count, including many dead repos and even Nethermind's repo. I don't know who Nethermind is, but on the day, and apparently, if I'm understanding this correctly, they're saying this was on the day the Ethereum Foundation posted a chart showing Solana in second place. I think that's EF is supposed to be Ethereum Foundation. Their pride was hurt. He writes, looks like I also need to add dev activity to list. So obviously I haven't double checked any of this. I'm not interested enough in Solana to actually check any of these things. But people who are watching Solana closely often you see posts like this. They say that the numbers reported both by Solana aren't quite right. And even within our own ecosystem, we've had a lot of people look at Solana numbers and point out inconsistencies or what they perceive to be inconsistencies with those numbers. And we've talked over the years about a lot of these different these reasons to question the Solana numbers. But there have always been a lot of questions about Solana. I'll put it that way. There have always been a lot of questions, and we sort of like think of they're sort of the behemoth in terms of traffic. But man, I'm not, I'm not in a position to validate any of Solana's claims about their traffic. And I think most people watching crypto probably aren't either. It's like they certainly seem to be doing a lot of volume, but how much are they really doing? So let's see. Okay. Yeah. Pucky Hawk, banks could make a few bucks or more by having their own cold wallets. Just thought, oh yeah. Oh yeah, my friend. The TradFi institutions are thinking very much about custody. Because if you think about what banks do, banks are the original masters of TVL. What they want you to do is lock your assets with them. That is what they do. They custody your assets, and then they do stuff with your assets to make themselves money. And then they also charge you often for the service of custody of your own assets. So it's a great business. In a lot of ways, it's a great business, which is why they're so heavily regulated. But oh, yes, your instincts are correct. They are very much thinking about all the different ways they can custody their customers' crypto assets and then make money with those assets while they're holding them. This is a little bit different than the way it works in the crypto world. Certainly that exact thing does go on in the crypto world. We know that from FTX, but it's this is exactly what they're thinking about. Okay. And they're thinking about staking. The amendment to the registration statement we looked at, I think last night, had something like 476 references, and that was in an ADA only fund, I believe, and it had 476 references to ADA staking. They're TradFi institutions, and that was Grayscale, so not really a TradFi institution, but those types of institutions are very much thinking about staking. I think that is correct. Okay, and this is the one that a bunch of people asked about today. So Cardano, I don't know if we were ever supposed to pronounce this. I never paid enough attention to this ecosystem to even know how to pronounce their name. I don't know if it's supposed to be Cadena, 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 Cadena. I want to say Cadena. I'm just going to say Cadena. Correct me if I'm wrong. Cardano public announcement. We regret to announce the Cardano organization is no longer able to continue business operations and will be ceasing all business activity and active maintenance of the Cardano blockchain immediately. How about that? How about that for a kick in the gut? Let's say you're a Cardano enthusiast, and all of a sudden, it's not just like one entity doing stuff in your ecosystem. The announcement comes out from Cardano_IO, and it's just like the whole Cardano organization is done. We're quitting. We're not only not going to build anything new, we're ceasing all maintenance of the blockchain immediately. And I don't know if there was forewarning on this. J. Marie says, Cadena. That is like the worst one. If I think they picked the worst pronunciation. Cadena. Yeah, I think everybody in the world, everybody in crypto who never bought uh, Cardano, whatever it is, I think everybody's glad they never bought it. Charles's response, though, is kind of predictable. Charles often does this, and this is, I think I think a big part of this is probably just out of like compassion. I think he sees an opportunity, but also like part of it is probably compassion. He comes back with anyone from the Cardano ecosystem want to reach out. And we've seen Charles do this before. This sort of, I remember way back in the day on Reddit, I believe it was on Reddit. I believe this happened with Ethereum Classic. All of a sudden, Charles popped up and he's like, hey, maybe we can develop something to help out the Ethereum Classic people. When the DAO hack happened, everybody probably knows the story with Ethereum Classic, but the DAO hack happened and people got afraid they were going to go to jail because a lot of people, big names in Ethereum, were all in favor of the DAO. This is the original DAO. There was a gigantic hack. Everybody's afraid they were going to get in trouble. Maybe they'd go to jail. So they rolled back the blockchain, right? This blockchain that wasn't supposed to be susceptible to people altering the ledger. They just went ahead and rolled back the ledger. So a lot of people got mad about that because the blockchain was supposed to be resistant to that kind of tampering. And they made this thing called Ethereum Classic. And I remember back in the day, Charles jumped out and he was like, hey, he was like sympathetic to their cause. And he was like, hey, I'll help you guys. True. He already there was already beef with him and Vitalik, that kind of thing. But so, he kind of had some ulterior motives, to help them. It wasn't, purely altruistic. But we've seen Charles do this before. So it's kind of no surprise to me that you'd see him jump out. And of course, when we who are familiar with what's going on in Cardano see this, we immediately know the possibilities here. And it's posted, first comment right here, offering a transition of Cardano to a Cardano side chain. So Cardano could be a midnight partner chain. Maybe that's what Charles has got on his mind here. Is it a good idea or not? So I've seen this kind of thing happen before. I think we've seen this with NFT projects when the developers rug on an NFT project. Sometimes we see another NFT project try to include those NFT holders. Whether or not it's a good idea is another question, right? So you could argue a bunch of things about this. You could say, this is altruistic. This is a really nice thing to do. Or you could argue, this is just, someone seeing an opportunity and, there's a little virtue signaling going on here. You could argue something like that too. But whatever motivations you think Charles might have here, it's like, regardless of the motivations, is it a good idea to do this? Maybe the partner chain thing makes it a little bit bigger opportunity than if it was just like, hey, what can we do to help you guys? Because I've definitely seen that not work out in the NFT context. Not that I was a big NFT lover, but at least with PFP NFTs. But maybe there's something Charles can do here on the partner chain front. Whether or not there's benefit to be had on our end from that, I don't know. I mean, I guess it would be kind of cool to say that Midnight helped Cardano to continue to exist, as a partner chain, and maybe that produces transactions, that are beneficial to the greater Cardano ecosystem. I don't know. I think this was a funny a comment. Absorb and rebrand Cardano. So maybe we end up with the Cardano side chain, partner chain. But as you can see, pretty brutal. This is the 1 month chart. Pretty brutal. Look at this big red step down and then another big red step down over the last couple of days. So pretty brutal for the Cardano people. Whether or not Cardano can do anything to help them, I don't know. So much like the rest of crypto, the Cardano people are probably sitting there. They're probably not doing this. They're probably extremely enraged right now if they didn't see this coming. Maybe they all saw it coming. I don't know. I don't pay attention to that ecosystem. So maybe they all saw it coming, but I would imagine some portion of them are not sitting there patiently waiting like the person in this thumbnail, but sitting there in silent rage. Also, maybe waiting to see if anything happens on the Cardano front because of Charles's comment. But I've heard a few people talking about Meld recently. A few people have mentioned Meld to me in the comments over the last couple of weeks. And it kind of took me by surprise because I sort of, to be honest with you, after that initial period where Meld sort of, the idea of Meld, I'll say Meld entered the public consciousness in Cardano back in the day. There was a lot of examination. I kind of looked Meld over, and it was not compelling to me. So I just sort of stopped paying attention to Meld and didn't watch any of their stuff. And I think I didn't. I used to have a lot of people try to challenge me on that. They would sort of even in private conversations, people would be like, I don't understand why you're not embracing Meld. And I would tell them why I thought it wasn't compelling. And it wasn't even so much, I didn't even have to look into it enough to come up with reasons why I thought it wasn't good. I just explained it wasn't, it was not, the case made for Meld was not sufficient to make me investigate it further. But I think a lot of people must have had Meld because I've been kind of surprised the number of people who mentioned it to me because I haven't really thought about Meld for years. So I'll say the same thing about World Mobile that I've always said about it, Mr. Tigger Monster. And that's that I love the proclaimed mission to connect the unconnected. I love the mission. I like that part. Here you're asking me about the token. I don't know anything about the token. I have no idea about the token. I don't know anything about the token. That's kind of been on purpose. I kind of the same thing. I love the mission. I love the idea. The token, I was not compelled to investigate the token more closely. I even like all the people involved. I like the people involved in World Mobile. And like I said, very, very much like the mission. Don't know anything about the token. Yeah, that cross-border, the cross-border use case for crypto is something that seems, no pun intended, pedestrian. It seems pedestrian to people who don't have reason to send money cross-border. But if you do send money to another country that maybe is sort of, outside, it's not, one of the it's not a super integrated part of sort of the Western banking world, then you instantly understand why this use case is important for crypto. I think it is a really important use case. And there have been times when I've been sort of wishing, when I was sending money to someone and just wishing they had some access to an exchange. They actually could have had they could have had access to an exchange in the country they were in. They just didn't. It was just beyond their technical, comfort zone, so they couldn't do it. But yeah, I think this is actually a really important use case for crypto. And if you've ever had to send money, if you've ever needed to send money regularly like this, you understand why. I can't even. I can't tell what you're responding to. Let me know let me know what you mean. Truckdono, thank you for joining. Good to see you. I don't know. There have been so many products and things named after Satoshi that I don't even know which one was Toshi at this point. Okay, Adam, did you hear they found out about 300 FL? What is 300 FL? I don't know. I don't know what that's a reference to. I don't know what that's a reference to. Let me know what you're talking about, Adam. Okay, I think once again, we've kind of covered all of the news for today. There were so many news items today. I actually saved like one or two things for tomorrow, but I think we covered enough big items. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about? Every night I do this, I ask if there are any other items anybody wants to discuss. And there's enough lag sort of in the YouTube system that I sort of ask. And then by the time it seems like there are no other items, I'll hit end stream, play the outro, and then like three people will post things, and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have seen that. Um, okay. Any other Any other news items anybody thinks we should discuss? So I can't even says this. AOS, I'm a true fan. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Whether you're a true fan of Cardano or this channel or both, I appreciate any of those. I do have hard opinions. However, don't skip comments. Let's question Cardano and its practicality. I kind of have to be a little selective. I try to hit all the comments that I think we can have a good conversation about. Sometimes people will ask me about something that's kind of like off topic, or I just don't have anything to contribute to that topic. So I try to hit the ones that are going to be the most, entertaining / informative for the most people. So sometimes I'll skip stuff, and it's not really because I don't like want to discuss a hard issue. It's just because I don't think it'll, fit in with the conversation. No, no. This is an easy question. This is not a hard one. This is an easy one. This is a very easy one. I'm gonna go hard no on that. I cannot think of I guess I can, but it's difficult to think of a less sexy human being than Elizabeth Warren. If I try to think of like the least sexy person on earth, it's like uh there's nothing about that person that is attractive or sexy. Even if they weren't the generalissimo of the generalissima of the anti-crypto army. She's just an unsexy person physically as well. If Coinbase can start Base, Brian Packard, good question. Can Cardano start a Coinbase type of exchange? That'd be pretty funny if the most decentralized ecosystem in all of crypto decided to start a centralized exchange to compete with Coinbase. That'd be fantastic. I mean, Base is like, slightly decentralized, but like vastly centralized. So I guess we could start one that's like slightly centralized, but vastly decentralized, just like the mirror image, and have it compete with Base. So good idea. I like it. Wind drinks and the helmet. I haven't been drinking much lately. I've been drinking mainly kava. For the last couple of years, I've been drinking kava. I got old and my recovery abilities left me. My ability to recover left me. And the hangovers got too severe. I'm not afraid to say that. It got too hard to recover. And it was messing up my workouts, and just got old. Just got too old to recover. So had that problem. And that's a good segue to Adam's comment. 300 Franzia bladders in the west wing behind a false wall. Kamala's hiding spot. I love it. I love it. When it became apparent that she loved wine, when that became apparent during the last administration, that was like my favorite thing about that whole White House administration. And the number of interviews she gave where it seemed like she just got a little hammer time before giving the interview. That was one of the most entertaining things about the last administration. I mean, you got Hunter and all of his things, and you got Biden. You had Biden and his his lack of his like loss of cognition. That was all super funny, but Kamala's love of wine was one of the funniest things to me. You just need a couple beers. Yeah, I'm more of a whiskey. I like to drink whiskey. I like to drink wine, but I definitely like to drink whiskey, and all of it, all of it. I lost my ability to recover from all of it, unfortunately. I still have a few drinks here and there, not often, very rarely, but I'll if something special comes up, I'm definitely willing to have a drink. But it is my hammer time days are long past me, or I should say, my ability to recover from hammer time has long past me. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, Kava is amazing. Kava is amazing. I think I've got I've got Kava from many, many different islands in a room pretty close to the room I'm in, and Kava is great. Kava is interesting though. Kava works great on me. I have friends, many friends, they've indulged in certain substances over the course of their life, and Kava doesn't work at all on them. So if Kava doesn't work on you, so obviously it's not for you, S Walker, because obviously it works on you. But if you ever try Kava and it doesn't work on you, just Google why isn't Kava working on me, and you'll see the various substances that can make it hard for Kava to work on you. But if you haven't indulged in those substances, Kava can work wonderfully, and the recovery way better, way better. Seems to be way, way better than alcohol. I'll just put it that way. I won't get into the fine grained details here, but I've talked about kava before on this channel. J Marie, I'm still recovering from Rare Evo. Yeah, dude, those kind of events, it's man, yeah, I'm way beyond the ability to drink at those kind of events like I used to. Yeah, I cannot do what I once could do. That's for sure. No, I can't even. I still have high hopes. So the question is basically, do you think even if Cardano is the best tech, do you think it will just never be used? No, I have high hopes for Cardano. I really do think it's just like this. I really think it's like Toyota building very, very reliable cars and eventually overtaking GM and Ford in terms of, like consumers all acknowledging that it's better, that Toyota is better, more reliable than GM and Ford. And you can make whatever arguments you want today, but if you go back to the year like 2000, pretty tough to argue the opposite. So I think, in Toyota, they built cars for decades and decades and decades and did the thing we talked about earlier in this video, just incrementally, day after day, got better and better and better, developed some novel things, in manufacturing that were subsequently adopted all over the world, all those things. If you've been involved in manufacturing, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it wasn't always that way in the early days, when Chevy and Ford and the American manufacturers were making these gigantic cars and Toyota was making these little tiny cars. Nobody ever imagined that we would get to where we would get, in the last 20 years. Nobody thought it would ever end up that way, where, the difference in perception of reliability between Toyotas and Fords and Chevys and Chryslers was so extreme in like the year 2000, 2005, whatever you think the peak of Toyota was. Nobody would have ever imagined we got there. I think Cardano is doing that right now. We're the Toyota with the better technology, better manufacturing methods. We're doing all that stuff right now. People just don't realize what we're doing. Whiskey brings out the Viking in me, and that's never good. I never had that. I do know people who have that problem. I've definitely had friends over the years, because we definitely would go all out. We would go all out, and I had friends, and it was always so unpredictable. But I definitely had friends. Some of the nicest dudes, occasionally would turn out to be the Vikings, who, you get a few drinks in them and wildness happens. And I have a few friends like that who probably should have never drank and should never drink. Yeah, it's hard to predict who falls in that category. That's why alcohol is just like such a powerful drug. It is such a powerful drug. Yeah, yeah, I got to agree. I do not drink beer. But I got to agree with you. I used to drink beer, and it's hard to say that what you're describing there is not highly enjoyable unless you're some kind of communist. I'm sure communists would come up with some argument why that's not good, but I think if you don't enjoy what you're describing, which is a ice cold beer, then you're probably some kind of communist for sure. Pucky Hawk, this is pretty funny. Pucky Hawk says, well, I think that everyone is pretty cool here. I've never actually chatted on YouTube before this day in my entire life. We do it like every night. Sunday through Thursday night. So feel free to join anytime. I agree with this. Cardano will hit, but when is anyone's best guess? Yeah, I think we can all only guess when it's actually going to hit. I think that's for sure true. S. Walker says, I have buddies texting me lately. They're losing hope in Cardano. Great bottoming emotional signals. Yeah, I mean, I've tried to talk about this lately on the videos, but this thing that we're going through right now, this happens every cycle. Every cycle we get to points like this, and it's really tough if you haven't been through many cycles, or if it's your first cycle, and I'm talking about your friends here. It's very difficult because it really seems dark. It gets real dark. And let's face it, while every responsible person in crypto tells everybody don't invest more than you can afford to lose, what do people do? They always invest more than they can afford to lose. And you go through these like very dark times. I mean, like, one of the, people used to talk about how the bottom signal could be determined by how many people are posting, suicide hotlines on crypto. So I think YouTube probably bans me for even saying that word or something, but that was like a common thing. Like, how many times those hotlines would get posted on like crypto social media was like a good bottom signal back in the day. So it gets dark. It gets dark because people overextend themselves. They go too deep in crypto, and they have short time horizons. They have a short term, perspective on crypto. And, it's really bizarre how effectively people will buy high and sell low, and they'll do it. And they have to go to their loved ones and explain why they lost all the money. A week ago or something, I posted that meme, and it was like, a young couple, a dude with his handsome, young fiance or wife, whatever, girlfriend, and he's kind of covering her eyes, and he says, remember that money we were saving up for the house? And then, he's obviously going to like take his hands from in front of her eyes and show her the crypto charts with a gigantic red downward candle. It's like, I mean, that's a meme and a joke, last week, but it's real life. It's real life for a lot of people. And I feel bad. I feel bad for anybody who finds themselves in that position. It's like serious stuff. This is like real serious life stuff. So, man, I try to tell people, just DCA, whatever it is you're interested in, just DCA over the course of an entire cycle. Don't go in, don't be the guy who drops the money we've been saving for the house, quote unquote. Don't be the guy who drops that at the top and then sells low. Like, that is a horrible thing. So I feel bad for anybody that happens to. Cardano Universe says holiday drinker. Yep, it's a good way to be. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Christmas White Russian. Oh, that sounds pretty good. I'm kind of, you guys know I'm an anti-carb guy, but I gotta admit, like, back before, that's why I don't drink beer, but because I'm a carnivore. So for the last, it'll be 6 years in January? I can't remember if it's 6 or 7. I think it's just 6 years in January. I have not eaten carbs, so White Russians are out for me. Beer is out for me. Obviously, distillation of whiskey removes, you end up with a bunch of weird flavonoids and other chemical compounds from distillation, but you don't end up with classical carbs. You could say that the alcohol calories are, equally non-beneficial, whatever. But anyways, White Russian sounds great. Will I be drinking one this holiday season? I will not because of the carb thing, but they are delicious. I had one. I used to drink them back in the day, in my carb days, no longer. Rogan after midnight. I would love that. I don't know if it can happen though. Like I almost felt bad. I almost felt bad because I remember before Gogan, before the Wyoming summit, Charles used to always say Rogan after Gogan, which was, I think, a great way to create momentum in the community. However, as a longtime watcher of Rogan, I think I watched Rogan, man, I was on Rogan's, website before he even had a podcast, clear back in the early, I remember when he started his podcast and I was like, oh, that's a great idea. That dude will have a great podcast. Turned out the biggest podcast in the world, depending on what week it is. But just like if you had listened to Rogan all those years, it's like part of you sank when you heard Charles say Rogan after Gogan, because you were like, man, Rogan is, I feel like part of his metric for selecting guests is not just like who's doing something awesome in the world. It's also like who's doing something awesome in the world and whose personality I think will be complementary to mine to make for a good podcast. Because I think there's a lot of people who have done something great in the world or have some great commentary, something like that. And Rogan will never have them on just because he doesn't think their personality is maybe a good mix, with his. And then you've got a second category. You've got Rogan being an extremely wealthy guy and not wanting to get in trouble with the SEC. That's the other part of it. So if you think about the crypto people he's had on like Andreas Antonopoulos, right? Who's not really promoting an ecosystem. He's just a Bitcoin guy, right? And Bitcoin was kind of safe. Nobody was really worried about the SEC coming after you for talking about Bitcoin in your podcast. But Rogan's a very rich guy. He does not want to get in trouble with the SEC. And you've got Charles, who very obviously just represents Cardano. So I think there's like a lot of reasons why Rogan might not have on somebody like Charles. Like Charles is very smart and he kind of commands the conversation. So I could see Joe like being afraid to have Charles on because Charles is such a good talker. But Charles has done a great job recently. In some of the recent podcasts he's gone on, he's done a great job of, not making it a monologue like on his AMAs and making it a conversation. Like the Sean Ryan podcast, I thought was great. Sean Ryan, that was a great back and forth conversation. But then again, like Sean Ryan has a very different personality than Rogan. Like Rogan likes to jump in and make big points, and challenge his guest. Sean Ryan is more like that type of very good interviewer who knows when to get out of the way. He knows when to get out of the way and just let his guest talk, ask the right question and then let his guest go crazy. Charles definitely excels in that environment. I could see Rogan being afraid of having Charles on because Charles is kind of a powerful talker and Rogan likes to jump in and like challenge people and like say, actually, and then like make a statement that's like the exact opposite of whatever the guest has just been presenting. So I could see Rogan being a little afraid of having Charles on because Charles is a powerful promoter, powerful talker. And I could see Rogan being afraid of, conflict in that conversation, even though in actuality, I think those are false. Those would be false concerns. I think Charles would go on there and do just like he did on the Sean Ryan podcast. He would have a game plan worked out far in advance about how to be a great podcast guest on Rogan and make Rogan like him. I think Charles would have a plan worked out to make Rogan like him. And it could happen. It could happen. Lex seems to like Charles. Those two seem to get along great. And Rogan likes Lex. So, I get the impression that Charles that's probably the way that Charles ends up on that podcast, through Lex, So, but then again, think about Lex's personality. Lex is the guy who goes on Rogan's show the first time wearing his suit, and he requests to be able to play the guitar. It's all quite, like charming and geeky. And that's not Charles. Charles isn't like the unassuming Lex Friedman who's going to go on the show, awkwardly wearing a black and white suit and awkwardly, requesting to play a guitar solo on his first appearance. Rogan gets along well with those types of guests. Charles is like the opposite of that. He's not the unassuming nerd who's going to try to play a guitar solo, and then say it's because it's his only chance to do something like that in front of an audience of millions. That's not Charles. So anyways, that's way too long, but that's my breakdown of Charles on Rogan. So something I do think about a lot, though, because I've watched obviously a lot of Charles and a crazy amount of Rogan over the years, long before he was associated with kind of the part of the political spectrum he is now. Because long ago, Rogan was very much not on that part of the political spectrum. And I think he's really not. He's still not, to the extent that people think he is. So not that there'd be anything wrong with that. I just think he's not. I think his perspectives are, not necessarily aligned with either side. Okay. Vodka and Kahlua and cream. You guys are talking about all the cocktails a lot of cocktails I used to enjoy when I could eat carbs. I agree with you though. Black Russians, also great. Who was it? Stoli. Stoli had a great print ad. Back in the day, we had these things called magazines. And I'm old, so I was around in those days when we just had magazines. And Stoli used to put out great ads for both White Russians and Black Russians. Ads that would have been considered, probably would have gotten you canceled as a corporate brand in, maybe not 2025, but probably 2023. You probably would have gotten canceled. But Stoli did a great job marketing those drinks. Okay. Momentum will change for Cardano when midnight tokens arrive in wallets, especially if that happens contemporaneously with the arrival of liquidity on the macro front. And I have a feeling that Charles is probably, if he has to delay the start of the scavenger mine by a few days, and that makes it more likely that the launch of the midnight mainnet is closer to liquidity. I think he'll do those things, but we'll see. It might get too late. It might take too long, and there might be too much demand, and he just has to launch it anyways, but we'll see. Bucky Hawk says, I showed my wife charts, and she told me that I am a nerd. Yeah, man, I do not try to show charts to I don't do charts on this channel at all. I call that whole genre of YouTubing, I call that Fibonaccios. Oh yeah, no, I knew you were joking. I knew you were joking, Danil. Don't worry. I knew. I just took that opportunity to address the Charles on Rogan thing, but I knew you were actually joking when you said that. No worries. Okay, let's see. Yeah, dude, I'm a carnivore. I honestly can't remember if it's 6 years in. I think it's 7. I think it might be 7 years in January. I have like a very specific social media post back in the day that marks the day I started eating only as a carnivore. And I want to say January is 7 years, either 6 or 7 years. But yeah, I do not eat carbs. I just eat animals. So it's actually more normal. It's actually more normal than it sounds. Oh yeah, dude, I watch all that stuff. All the Rogan Bob Lazar interview, of course. I was excited for that the moment I heard it was going to happen, and following all the behind the scenes stuff going on that led to that. I was following all that, and maybe not the led to it, but all the commentary later on about how that happened. I was following all that stuff from Tom DeLonge's first appearance on Rogan to the release of those videos in December 2017, along with the articles, the big articles. I follow all that stuff. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, where would we be? Where would the Western world be on exploration of the cosmos without SpaceX? I mean, SpaceX has significantly contributed to pushing us back into exploration of the cosmos. I'll put it that way. Um, let's see. Pucky Hawk, you have a clear speaking voice and analyzing your speech pattern. You almost never say or and that is where most people just cannot talk. I see. I just said it. I just said because I read it, but I do say it. I try not to say it very often. I try to do a good job on this, but I used to do these all recorded, so I could just go back and re-record if I used a word that didn't contribute to the video. Now I'm doing them live, and I told everybody when I started, I'll do a bad job on these live streams at first, and then I'll get better. Just like Cardano, incrementally, episode by episode, stream by stream, I'll get better. If I ever meet AOS, I will act like I don't know who he is because I don't want him to know I know who he is. I can't even. I appreciate that. You know, the times I have gone to Cardano events, I've said this even recently. I don't go to Cardano events anymore because the times I've gone, somebody has recognized my voice. And I get in weird situations. Like I get in conversations where people start telling me about my own channel, not realizing it's my channel, which that part I don't mind, but obviously I don't want people to recognize my voice. That's kind of problematic. So, okay. Thank you. I do appreciate that. I do appreciate that. If you ever recognize me in public and you do not reveal it, I will very much appreciate that. I hope that's the case. I hope he has Charles on sometime. I don't know. I think honestly, he's probably a little bit more afraid of the regulatory stuff than people realize. I don't think I think he's more afraid of that than he is of any individual person. Like, I think he definitely picks people personality wise to have a good podcast. I think he's very cognizant of whose personality is going to produce a good podcast along with him. But I think he also is very cognizant of regulatory issues. Like, ask yourself, how many crypto people has Rogan ever had on his show? So, you know, as many requests as he gets for Charles, he probably gets a ton of requests for people like Vitalik, and, there's a million personalities in crypto who would be great on his podcast. He's never had any of them. He's had a very small number. Andreas Antonopoulos multiple times. But if you think about it, Andreas is the easiest one from a regulatory perspective. He never had to worry about the SEC coming after him because Andreas talked about Bitcoin. So I think that's a bigger issue. Sean Ryan, Michael Herrera. Michael Herrera was the one who was, I don't want to go down too much the UFO direction, but that was the one where he was in, Michael Herrera was in the Philippines or Indonesia, and he came upon the Six Gun, and there was some kind of a high-speed team that disarmed him and his fellow soldiers and basically told them they were going to kill them, and then they confiscated their cameras and all that kind of stuff. That's the story, right? That's what I'm thinking of. Then there was the follow-up where Jake Barber told Michael Herrera, I believe, that those guys were transporting people who would become, what was it, remote viewers or something. I think that's the Michael Herrera one. Let me know if I've got the right one, S. Walker. A good Black Russian isn't bad. I agree. It's delicious. Okay, here's a serious comment. LT2330, kind of pissed at the price. I've seen this podcast for a long time, but never really heard it. Much respect for being in the space for so long. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I think we would all prefer if the price would fix itself. Malo Blesov, good morning. Good morning. Thank you. Malo Blesov says, good morning, crazy monsters. That's a good description of all of us in Cardano, I think. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining. While you were technically still an omnivore, but gastrointestinally challenged. Yeah, I mean, I think you can argue that humans, we won't get into, there's a lot of interesting historical, interesting conversations you can have, about, what people think humans ate in the past. There's a lot of interesting conversations you can have. We don't need to do that here. This one is not going to be a carnivore podcast. I tend to talk about carnivore stuff during World Carnivore Month, which is January. I believe it's usually in January, and I usually do a lot of videos about carnivore stuff during January, but I try not to drive everybody crazy with it throughout the year. Beamer House, glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. I love it too. I love to hear it too. Okay, S. Walker, I would disagree with you on SpaceX is the public-facing space agency, not the real space program, which is actually occurring behind the scenes. It's not furthering anything except distraction. So this is kind of the UAP community take on this. You could argue if you believe that the U.S. government already has, alien technology or very advanced technology, that if you don't believe it's alien technology, very advanced technology that we don't know about, then you could argue that that none of this makes sense, that all the stuff SpaceX is doing is just like a front to make people believe that we're making progress on space exploration, when really we have much more advanced stuff, hidden away from the public. I think that's perfectly possible. I mean, I'm definitely into all the UAP stuff. I definitely follow the UAP news very closely. So I am more than happy to entertain any of those possibilities. Okay. Blockchain in China. Thank you for making it. Good to see you. We need an on-camera stream with the helmet to get the vibes back. So the only problem is, Eric, the visor, the helmet, it kind of messes up the audio. It's kind of hard to talk. It fogs up, so it's hard to see the screen. It's just like less convenient. Maybe we'll do it someday, but it definitely makes it difficult to do these streams. Whoa, I started work 1 hour earlier just so I don't miss live. Thank you for making it. I appreciate that. Very much. That's yeah, I appreciate that very much. Okay, we have gone for an hour 41. This is definitely one of the longer ones we've done in a long time. I think we covered many topics. I kind of like that there were enough people on. We could kind of have a discussion about some things beyond just the news items we discussed. So maybe in the future, probably the alien rumor rundowns are a good place for that. Although I really like that we can do it here. So anytime we can do it here, we can also do that here. Hopefully it doesn't drive. I'm sure there's some portion of people who hate it because they would prefer just to talk about Cardano all the time. But I also like all the other topics. So this is a good point to wrap up. Truckdono, thank you for joining. Everybody else, I hope you're having a great week. Hope you're looking forward to a great end to your week, last few days of the week, and then a great weekend. Puggy Hawk says, us noobs are slowly finding the cool people. Yep, we'll definitely do some alien rumor rundown soon. There are some things to talk about, definitely, since the last one was a long time ago. But I hope everybody's having a great week, and I will talk to you soon.